to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Fletcher, and joining me as always is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, how you doing, buddy?
There's thunder in the background, and I'm still kind of got some lingering issues from getting to see the eye of the storm for the third time in my life. So I'm a little paranoid. I'm checking to make sure I've got my backups in place. I've got my data protected. I'm reevaluating, making sure I can roll back.
You found a way to segue this disaster in Houston to our guest. I'm so impressed. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people think we're going to be talking about disaster recovery solutions, but no, we're talking about vSAN 8 Update 3, which does have some great failover capability that we'll be touching on for sure. But joining us on this episode is our good friend, Mr. Pete Koehler. Pete, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me back. It's been a while here, I think, since the last release, but I think we have some nice things to really go over.
I agree. vSAN 8 Update 3, part of VMware Cloud Foundation 5.2. And I definitely want to touch on that. So I want to go over some features. Pete, I'll let you drive in terms of, we'll do this for about 30, 40 minutes, whatever time you allow. But at the end of the day, I'd love to hit on the most important features and then where they fit inside of VMware Cloud Foundation as well, because I know there's some things that may not be new to vSAN, but they're now new and available in VCF. So let's be sure to point those out as well. So Pete, where do we want to start, my friend?
Yeah, I think the first logical place when we think about us looking at our solution, that being VMware Cloud Foundation, is to look at some of the new support that we have in vSAN for VCF. In particular, the support of a stretch clustering using vSAN ESA. Really, really important for so many reasons. So many of our large customers, large and small, actually use stretch clustering, and it's wildly successful. Frankly, it's the best way to stretch a cluster when you look at other options out there, and so that part has been great. But with the introduction of the vSAN Express Storage Architecture just about 2 years ago, coming this month, is that we didn't have support for that topology within VMware Cloud Foundation. Well, thanks to vSAN 8 Update 3 and VCF 5.2, we do now have that support. So it's really going to help our customers take advantage of the fundamental benefits of the Express Storage Architecture in that sort of arrangement, which is just, way better performance, way better storage efficiency, and they can even reduce the amount of traffic that runs across that inner site link.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Express Storage Architecture being out for a little while now, and every customer I've spoken to about it to this day is like, it's night and day. It's so much faster. It's, nobody's looking back. But it was weird when it wasn't supported inside of VCF. So I just remember last year when everyone was talking about how great, the Express Storage Architecture was, there was like that awkward moment of like, well, it's not in VCF yet.
And
we're stretched.
I think we fully acknowledge the fact that, in our previous releases of VMware Cloud Foundation, that there was always a little bit of a lag for some of these capabilities, some of these features. And it's really just, in so many ways, VMware focusing on the due diligence that is needed to make sure that operationally it all works as we state that it should. But I think this trend of seeing that these capabilities are being introduced much more quickly really reflects well on how we have modified sort of our internal systems to help accommodate some of this new innovation that we're bringing.
And I think this is really the last feature that was different between original storage and ESA. Like this compatibility, I feel like at this point we're really at full feature completeness and compatibility completeness with ESA, and it's been increasingly a smaller percentage of edge cases where people could justify doing OSA, but really it's only brownfield expansion where I still see that come up.
Beautiful. So what do you think was the reason why there was like a delay in getting it supported? Because clearly sometimes these things are more certification than anything, right? Like it works obviously, but it's just not supported, or what do you think was the lag? I know you work very closely with engineering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of the time when we're looking at scenarios where you're introducing a feature that already exists within the product, that being vSAN, into VMware Cloud Foundation. It's really focused on what kind of considerations are introduced into workflow mechanisms that are built within VMware Cloud Foundation that are unique. So it's those are the things that mostly that we're looking at. So the SDDC manager obviously is something that we rely upon to make sure that this is that it's capable of handling the new capabilities that we provide. And I think a good example of that is another new capability that we've introduced within vSAN 8 Update 3 and VCF 5.2, which is the support of vSAN Max as a principal storage within VMware Cloud Foundation. And really what this means is that when customers are, when they're able to create a workload domain within VCF using the SDDC manager, that they're going to be able to choose vSAN Max as the principal storage for that workload domain. Really nice, given the fact that, it was about a year ago that we introduced the vSAN Max as this centralized shared storage solution for vSphere clusters. So getting this into, sort of the workflow mechanisms for VMware Cloud Foundation is the very important and necessary step for many of our customers to be able to adopt this arrangement.
This is really nice because in theory, you could deploy vSAN Max with vSphere Foundation Edition, but really the customers that are going to be deploying vSAN Max and the customers that are going to be using VCF, that Venn diagram is a circle. And being able to stand up that storage cluster within the workload domain, feed those other compute clusters, bridge that out, be able to use that as principal storage, so you can have just truly compute only clusters if you want for those specific use cases, or maybe you have applications with very disparate compute and storage, or you've got applications with very unique CPU licensing and you just want to have them completely dedicated that way. It should be able to address those use cases.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Like, Pete, what are some of the more common use cases for customers that are looking at vSAN Max?
In many cases, what we see, the main interest for several of our existing customers who are looking at vSAN Max are those who have centralized shared storage solutions, their favorite array vendor, and they need to simply grow, or they're looking for an opportunity to replace an aging storage array, something like that. But they have an organizational model that still has this, their dedicated storage team, for example, where they want to own the storage. And that's fine. That's great. With vSAN Max, that can really work well for those arrangements where you want to keep this fully separated in terms of realms of responsibility. But from a technical side, where we see most interest is with these customers who have recognized long ago that they have very unpredictable levels of growth on the compute side versus the storage side. They simply
service
can't
providers.
figure out. Yeah, they simply can't figure out what that growth rate is, and having this sort of deployment option where you have a fully disaggregated arrangement allows them to say, hey, you know what? I just need to grow my storage. This is great. I can just add a few hosts.
Nice. So, John was talking earlier about, about disasters and making sure you're protected. That's kind of a segue into this next section I wanted to ask you about. I know there's been some updates or some enhancements into the vSAN data protection. So can we share that?
Indeed, yeah. So this is maybe one of the most exciting parts of the announcement of vSAN 8 Update 3, and it's our ability to provide our protection capabilities using the really fast and efficient snapshot engine within the vSAN Express storage architecture. And what this really allows our customers to be able to do is to provide local protection capabilities for the purposes of, let's say, reverting a VM that they messed up for some reason or another, restoring a VM that they accidentally deleted from vCenter server inventory, and even clone some of their existing VMs from these snapshots for the purposes of their various workflow activities. If they want to test something, if they want to see if something is going to break in their environment, they can spin up some link clones really easily. The key behind the vSAN data protection capability is, of course, the snapshot engine within ESA. But on top of that lives a brand new interface that allows the customer to simply manage the snapshots in a way that maybe should have always been there. We never had that ability to say, oh, I just want to protect these VMs at some given interval. Let's say once a day or 3 times a day, whatever the case may be. And I want to keep these snapshots for a certain retention period, whether it's 3 days, a week, a month, or whatever the case may be. vSAN data protection gives our customers this ability. So it's really powerful. And because of the performance of this snapshot engine within ESA, they can feel really confident that they can just let these run in the background. And this can help sort of augment their existing protection strategies that they've already implemented.
Okay. So I know, John and we've even done some sessions on this in the past. In terms of snapshots not all being created equal. I'm curious, what type of snapshots are we talking here? Because we all know that that word is loosely used in the industry.
Yeah, indeed. I think you had one of the most popular sessions there, if I recall right. Just maybe even on the name alone, that was an enticing element there. But the dubious characteristics that you may be referring to with snapshots within a VMware context were based off of this notion of a redo log, sort of an approach in which when snapshots were created, it had to run through a series of delta disks in order to figure out where was the data living at, and if there were updates, how would it run through this snapshot chain. That historically was a very labor-intensive mechanism from a compute and I/O side of things. Well, what we did with the Express Storage architecture is, first of all, that's built on a brand new log structured file system. Now, one of the benefits about a log structured file system is that you can understand how data has been changed by a series of metadata redirects. And that's historically what a lot of storage array vendors always used within their array-based snapshot mechanisms. Really good. And we all knew that from a storage array perspective, those snapshots typically worked really well. They were really fast, very efficient, and so forth. So in sort of at a high level, you can think of the snapshot mechanisms within ESA being very analogous to that. They're essentially redirect on write snapshots that simply use these redirects for metadata to help us understand where the most up-to-date information, where it actually lives. We incorporate that within the snapshot mechanism itself so that when you're reverting VMs or cloning VMs, we can understand where this data actually lives, and we do it very quickly. And that's how we're able to achieve essentially no performance impact for these operations. So we can have as many as 200 snapshots per VM, which is very different than what we had in the past. And not that you would even want that many in the first place with the old mechanism that would have, really been maybe a career limiting move for a lot of people if they routinely did that under an old arrangement.
So there's not that same performance penalty as in, like you have a bunch of snapshots in previous versions and you're going to have a bad day.
Indeed. And our internal testing from the very beginning of the testing with the Express Storage architecture showed that there was hardly any difference in our performance from the moment that the first snapshot was taken through any additional snapshots on that VM. Very little change. And it also helped eliminate, some of those other challenges that you had with those redo log based approaches for snapshotting, which was getting rid of the snapshots. or consolidating, merging those snapshots. Typically a resource intensive thing that may take hours. We've completely eliminated that. So it's really this backing engine that allows us to do the things that is in vSAN data protection today, and is going to set the stage for a lot of really good things in the future.
Yeah, another issue, obviously, with snapshots in the day was that they weren't first-class citizens, or tied to individual VMs, and certainly it was very common to hear that snapshots are not backups, right? This is a conversation for a long time, and I know this. I know we're not saying this is the new backup solution, but it seems like it does everything that backup does. If it looks like a backup, smells like a backup, maybe it is a backup, but are there any risks involved with these snapshots as in previous times?
Sure. No, I think that's a really fair question. Right now, vSAN data protection is focused on local protection only, meaning that it is creating these snapshots of data within the boundary of that cluster, so to speak. So we know historically that a good protection strategy sort of centered around this notion of sort of the 3-2-1 protection strategy, where you'd have 3 copies of data, and it would be over a few different types of media, a few different locations, all that type of thing. Where the key for vSAN data protection here is that it can augment existing protection strategies. And by that, I mean, you can continue to use your backup solution that I'm sure is great in your environment. But where this can come in to play is the extremely fast and efficient ways of simply restoring the data. It's right there. You don't have to have a hot added, LUN sitting over in some other location restoring it. You can restore at the discrete VM, and that is really important consideration when you think about what we offer versus how snapshots are usually handled within other storage solutions. So I think the key takeaway on all of this is that it can really add some simplicity from a runbook perspective on restore operations and protection operations within an environment, and everybody will be better off for it simply because of that.
Well, and I like that, there's definitely still a better together story here. And this is true. Even environments who had some of the best backup software on the planet, they might have only backed up once a day or twice a day. And being able to have that schedule, say, hey, let's have hourlies, for 12 hours or for the day. Let's have dailies for, a week. Okay, beyond that, we can retain more. We can do that. Or we offload that to our secondary copies, or we have vSphere Replica and SRM, or we have our backup products. The backup products that do interop in the environment, they're going to call the ESA snapshots. They're going to get that goodness of that fast snap, that fast delete, that low stun operation. They are going to be able to leverage that. But it's not uncommon, already for those backup vendors to be a secondary line against the initial snap. Kind of like how the Windows admins out there are saying, look, there's actually another layer. I've got VSS inside my guest. So
exactly.
When someone said they deleted a file, like my first step was always like, okay, if it's Windows, like restore it, right click, restore previous versions. Is there VSS in the guest? Okay, it's not in the VSS. Okay, now let's go look at my my array snap or my VM backup. This is a one of those points, and hopefully it should reduce that dependency.
Yeah, and when you think about the fact that from a traditional VMware based snapshot perspective, that could never really protect you against the case where somebody accidentally deleted a VM. They just blew it away. Oops.
Yeah, it deletes the snaps with it too when you do that.
Yeah, you deleted everything else with it. This helps you recover from those scenarios. Really, really important.
So if I delete the HVAC system, I can instantly restore before we run out of air.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that is so nice too, that can also augment that protection strategy that you have in your environment, is the notion of a protection group. And so, as sort of the name implies, what this is just a container of sorts that you define. Hey, which VMs do you want to protect, and how often do you want to protect them? And then how long do you really want to retain those snapshots for them? But there's a unique capability. There's several unique capabilities here, but one of them is this notion of creating this group that's dynamic in nature. Which VMs are participating in this protection group? We can create what we refer to as a dynamic protection group that is based off of the naming of your VMs. So if you have a bunch of SQL VMs that you just want to make sure that you have some snapshots around on a regular interval, you can do
SQL
that easily.
asterisk, it'll just auto filter. So
Yeah, really neat.
okay,
That's
note to
fantastic.
self, Pete, we can't name our VMs after random Warcraft characters. We need a consistent naming. No Lord of the Rings characters, no Star Wars.
Yeah.
We need consistent naming schemas.
No more Breaking
Understood.
Bad. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. I like that. I love that. That's really smart. I mean, that's something that we needed back in the day with SRM when when administrators were having to like create these protection groups, and then it's like, oh wait, did you get those new VMs that were created? Oh, they're not in that protection group. Whoops.
Yeah,
But
and I could be wrong on this, but I can't think of another vendor that currently provides this specific capability. It's really unique, and I think there's, of course, a lot of opportunity that we have in the future with regards to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
one other question I had here is the protection group. Does that fire those snaps sequentially, or does that snap them and flush them consistently?
Yeah, so that's a great point, John. The protection group simply defines the VMs that you want are protected, but it does not define a precise time that all of the VMs within the protection group will be snapped. So it's a best effort at this time, meaning that it's going to look for an opportunity to snap those as reasonably quick as possible. But we recognize, of course, that when you have a fully distributed system, you'd have to, in order to make that a precise snap, all at the same time, we would have to do a lot of coordination there. At this time, it's not there yet.
But there are APIs to access the snap layer, and nothing stops someone from doing their own initiate stun, force quiescence, initiate snaps, resume thaw operation outside of it. And I did, so these APIs are there, which are interesting because there are backup vendors who overlay array snaps already today as a concept. And not promising anything, obviously no future promises, but the APIs are there for someone to go build that additional data protection layers on top of this.
Mm-hmm.
Is this also supported in PowerShell?
It is. I believe William Lamb has a nice blog post that was just posted this past week that shows some of the PowerShell calls needed.
So beyond the data protection, let's talk about cloning operations, because this is something that I feel like has been a weird feature request for almost 8 years for vSAN. I've got some 50 terabyte database. I have developers who want some writable clones of it in the morning, at 3 a.m. I don't feel like copying 50 terabytes of data every day. What are my options now? Yeah.
So in the past, our options were essentially recommending a copy data management solution so that the customer could say, oh, you want a copy of this VM, or the database is on a given VM, so that you can run some sort of a validation scenario against the latest build, whatever the case may be. Now the cloning capability within vSAN data protection will allow you to perform sort of this very basic copy data management arrangement. So what we could do here is say, okay, within a given point in time, let's say there was a good known state of a database. In that particular example, John, we could create a link clone from that snapshot, reinstantiate that out somewhere else. We can run the validations off of that given point in time without interrupting the production environment. And that's a really nice way to take advantage of this new instance, so to speak. But it was really efficient because it's using the snapshot data that was captured at the point in time that you wanted to create that link clone. So it's not a heavy lift like maybe some full copy clone would be in years past, and just really efficient and really quick.
Well, those large bulk copy operations, they slow down workflows, they make people unhappy, and I still remember the joy the first time I ever saw a link clone with VDI, but being able to see that giant VM and be like, oh, this is only taking up 4 megabytes, this clone copy, plus whatever deltas come in after you create it. That just always gives me a happy feeling that I'm an all-powerful storage wizard or something.
Yeah, it takes me back to my days at NetApp when I first saw FlexClone, and I was like, wait, you just did what? You just made a full clone of that in a couple of seconds, and it's writable. Of course, those licensing is very expensive, and back then I felt like they were like the only ones that could do that. It's cool to see, as all technology, other companies evolve and stuff. But yeah, it's so great to see this inside of VMware, because I remember the first time I saw doing clones at VMware early days when we didn't have link clones. There was a big performance penalty, and it was time consuming and.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about this workflow, because I've managed link clone type things for LUNs on the past, is you still had to go create those LUNs or double mount those or sort that out. You had additional orchestration you had to do, or pre-stage a VM that you would then copy stuff to. This is VM aware. You literally within the UI just say you either select restore or clone off of a snap point when you're going back through. So this is, from a UI click basis, obviously people are going to want to overlay automation on this for some use cases and things like that. But that self-service capability, where before you would have to be like, well, there's an API for it, and you can use VRO and then front that with VRA. And it's like, a lot of cases where you just need a clone to go look at something.
Yeah.
It helps.
Or like you said, test and dev. And it's like, I don't really want to, talk to anyone else. Just give me a copy of this so I can test something really quick and then blow it up,
Yeah. Yeah, that actually brings up a really good point when we think about the architecture of this in general. When we think about vSAN ESA and just vSAN in general, that we have this notion of essentially being an object-based storage system, meaning that our boundary of data is essentially just comprised of objects or the VM itself. So when we're creating these snapshots and essentially the link clones and all of that, it's just snapping that VM. Whereas, historically, when you have a storage array and a LUN running a cluster file system like VMFS, you may want one VM in there. It's going to snap the entire LUN. And that's one of the challenges there from just, the mechanics of it. And a lot of times the storage providers would have some workarounds for that, some aids to help you with that. But it tended to grow a little complex. And you had to be very careful about, recreating another LUN so that you could yank out just one VM for the purpose of whatever need you had.
I'm having flashbacks to Horkham file editing. Yeah, not fun.
I agree. Very cool. Well, Pete, I know there's also been, this is a huge release, and we're going to leave links in the show notes as well as on this podcast video. So, for the detailed blogs and all of the what's new docs, but we're running close on time. I do want to save some time for some of the management features. I know there's been some significant updates here as well. So maybe you can tell us what those are.
Yeah, indeed. So when you have a storage system, and especially a distributed storage system that's running just all different kinds of storage devices, the information about the storage devices is paramount. We need to have good quality information so that we can convey if there is an issue there. And so what we've done in vSAN 8 Update 3, as well as VCF 5.2, is introduce some new capabilities so that we could fetch the telemetry data about those storage devices in a more effective way. So this first element that we've improved is we've expanded the capabilities of our lifecycle management mechanism, that being VLCM. And that, of course, we know is responsible for updating the hypervisor and so forth. But within there, there's a component called the hardware support manager, and this is a vendor provided component that helps us be able to ingest some of the information that they have about their server so that we can make sure that the right firmware is on there and so forth. But what we've done here is we've extended it so that vendors can now say, they can allow for the device data, the metadata about that storage device to run through the HSM, so that then we can grab it and sort of normalize it into our health check mechanism. And this is going to help us understand when a storage device is, maybe showing some behaviors that is a little questionable. And we can take action on this instead of sort of being reactive when something already fails and then you have to make those adjustments. The key behind all of this is the better information that is inherently provided within the NVMe-based storage devices. John and I actually have had several conversations about this, that, smart data that's stored on NVMe-based storage devices is actually smart now. It's something that you can rely on, and that's exactly what we're doing here. But we're taking it a step further and making sure that the data that we get from drive vendor A is going to be interpreted in the same way as the data that we get from drive vendor B. And that's the mechanisms here that we've built right within this new proactive hardware management capability.
Yeah, this is definitely an improvement from the early versions of the hardware support manager, which was essentially a firmware push, just to upgrade the firmware for specific devices, but certainly no intelligence and no help at all whatsoever in terms of troubleshooting and health management. So that seems like this is evolving into a much better solution.
Yeah, and we already have 3 vendors signed up for it. So HP, Dell, and Lenovo already have their HSMs that have been updated. So all you need to do is update to vSAN 8, update 3, and you will be able to take advantage of these new capabilities.
Yeah, I talked to engineering about this, and one of the things they stressed is that some of the third parties are doing a lot of large data analysis and aggregate to try to do pre-failing. So I was like, well, can't we just pull the Smart Direct, figure this out? And they said that there actually is a lot of work being done by the OEMs and ODMs to try to make this a lot more. And you keep in mind that HSM, you need to deploy it anyways for VLCM reasons, just so you can patch your hosts. So that HSM can also do double duty here, and it also, I think, it's used for proactive HA and other things. So make sure those things ends up on quotes, because sometimes they need licensing. Make sure they get deployed. Make sure the plugins get installed. It's a little bit of work, but here's one more reason to go yell at your ops team to get that HSM stood up.
Yeah, and John, that's a good point. I think one of the things that we do want to showcase as well is the fact that we've enhanced one of the capabilities that we introduced just in vSAN 8 Update 2, which is the ability for us to create and show endurance levels of existing storage devices. That was something that we introduced in vSAN 8 Update 2. But of course, we understand that, some storage devices don't all behave in the very same way. So we wanted to provide a little bit more flexibility in the alerting mechanisms. And so that's exactly what we've done. We've introduced a single new health alert definition that you can fully customize, and you can define that alert definition on the endurance of these storage devices based off of the cluster name or the specific hosts themselves, or even a certain storage device manufacturer name. That's really a nice thing, especially as you may be mixing in some mixed use storage devices versus some read intensive storage devices and so forth. So this is a nice incremental improvement on something that we introduced just one version ago, but this will make it much more flexible.
What kind of variables are you using to define these thresholds?
Yeah, so there is a new alert definition that allows you to put in multiple arguments based off of the conditions that you have. So you can define it simply based off of the cluster itself, or the host name. You can set sort of a wildcard there for certain host names versus others. And then after you set everything that you want there, then you can say, I want my warning threshold to be set at, let's say, 80%, and then my alarm threshold at 90%, or 85 and 95 respectively, whatever the case may be. Those are the two conditions that you have control of. But ultimately, what we want to be able to share to the actual consumer, the customer who's going to be administering this, is when those storage devices are getting near their theoretical warranted endurance rating, you may need to replace it. And you may want to replace it, as opposed to a reactive state of, wow, this latency on this one storage device is all over the place. And it's only because it was running out of NAND flash cells in order to write, and it was doing a lot of garbage collection and so forth.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's nice to have. I mean, these are the types of things you see on vehicles all the time, right? Time to get service, time to get this and that. It's not, don't use this for much longer, or you're at your own risk, right? Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You want to keep this thing performant. Very nice.
Speaking of health checks, one of the nice new improvements that we've introduced in vSAN 8 Update 3 is some additional health checks for networks using the RDMA protocol, Rocky V2, essentially. In order to create a high performance network, you need to be highly dependent on the configuration of those network interface cards, as well as the switch gear that they ultimately will connect to. Now, we don't have a lot of control over the network switch gear. Of course, that's sort of outside the domain of our management capabilities, but we do have some visibility on these RDMA based NICs. And so that was really what we've done in vSAN 8 Update 3, is we've introduced some new alerting mechanisms, some new health checks that will check to see if that RDMA-based NIC is certified for ESXi, as well as vSAN itself. And also, and maybe even most importantly, if you're running the right firmware. We have seen all too many times over the many years of looking at networking in general, whether it be storage-based stuff or anything else, that firmware on NICs is incredibly important, and the respective driver that's being used is incredibly important. Now we have additional health checks that will focus on these RDMA-based NICs, so that we can make sure that these are the ones that are certified that you should be using. Now, you still have to configure those network switches correctly, which that's there's certainly
the
some
health checks are there for that too.
Yeah, so and that's not a trivial undertaking, but nonetheless, this is a great step forward in making that process a little easier.
And those can also be updated in VLCM, correct?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, everything that we focus on really is running, in a sense, through the VCLM framework. We want to make sure that these aren't one-off capabilities, and that's one of the sort of the exciting thing about this new approach is we know that this is a great way to do this, because VLCM is already in place. You don't need another new plugin. You don't need some other new module in order to achieve this end result.
Very nice. Well, yeah, Pete, I know there are so many more. And as I mentioned, I will be leaving links in the show notes to the What's New blogs and all the information. But maybe we can just do a very quick, rapid round. Like, we don't need to go into all the details, but what other things do people need to be aware of about vSAN 8 Update 3?
Oh, yeah. Well, other than it being the best version out there, we do really want to help our listeners know that we've made improvements elsewhere as well. So vSAN file services, we've increased the limit on the number of shares that can be created within a cluster. It's gone from 100 up to 250. So a big improvement there. We've also introduced some improvements with the VM IO trip analyzer. Now you can run that IO trip analyzer across multiple VMs. You could only do one VM at a time in the past. So it's a great performance troubleshooting tool that now becomes even better when you're thinking about multi-tiered applications and so forth. So those are just some of the few additional features on top of what I think are really some tremendous improvements for vSAN and all of VCF.
Absolutely. And of course, VMware Explorer is right around the corner. And I am sure, John and I, we've got a couple of sessions. I don't know if you know this, John and I are going to be doing a session on adventures in home labs with William Lamb. Looking forward to doing that one. But from vSAN, I'm sure you guys have got a laundry list of sessions. I will say, first off, folks, go to the catalog and just do a search for Pete Koehler, and then you'll be in good. You'll be good. You'll find all the good sessions. But or vSAN is probably easier to spell than Keeler.
Yeah, we've got a great workshop lined up.
Yeah, no, that's what I do. So, no, thanks a bunch, guys, and it'll be a busy time for sure. In fact, I'm working on some of the presentations right now. So, yeah.
It should be good. Looking forward to seeing you there. Pete, thanks as always for sharing the vSAN updates, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, guys.